we are going to introduce Kent Allen, our new friend, Kent Allen. Yes. Take it away, Kent.
A young family, as they were preparing to take off to go to graduate school, the pastor of their congregation brought the little family together and said, before you go, I need you to be able to come and do one of those little family presentations where the mom and dad and all the little kids get to speak. And on that blessed day, actually all week long, as this sweet little mother worked hard to get her two little boys and their little 4-year-old daughter to give their speeches in their church, the day finally arrived. And as the person that was conducting got up and announced the program, the little 4-year-old girl jumped up and sat down in her dad's lap, and she said, "Dad, I'm scared." And being the wise, kind dad that he was, he put his arms around her and gave her a big hug and a squeeze, and he just said, "Everything's going to be okay." A few seconds later, she grabbed him by the cheeks and pulled him down really close, and she said, "Dad, I forgot my poem." And being the wise, kind dad that he was, he just says, "Oh, honey, it's okay. Just get up and tell them how you feel." Well, she got up and she got down real close to the mic, and she said, "You make me sick." Now, ladies and gentlemen, I gotta tell you right now, you make me a little bit sick. And I hope before I'm done today that literally I won't make you sick. Today we're going to talk about some tough stuff, and I'd like to start out today by telling you a story about my grandfather. My great grandfather's name was Stillman Pond, and he was a gentleman that belonged to an organization, the LDS Church, and way back in the early 1830s. He took his wife and his 2 children, and they left part of New York, and they made their way down to a little community called Nauvoo. As they came into this little community, it was filled with malaria and filled with mosquitoes, and it was nothing much but a bog. And his wife, in a very short period of time, caught malaria, and she passed away. A few months later, he fell in love with a widow whose husband had passed away also of malaria, and they come together, and then over the next number of years that they were there in Nauvoo, they had 8 or 7 more children. For those of you that may know, the LDS, the Mormons, were kicked out of Nauvoo, and they came across in the early spring of 1847, and as they came across, he was one of those that was caught in the mud and the storms and the malaria and the plagues and all of the things that happened. And as he was coming through to a place they called winter quarters, 5 more of his children died of malaria and the black fever. He was so ill when he came into winter quarters that he had actually kicked out the front of the wagon, and he was laying down on a mattress in his wagon, guiding his team into the winter quarters. It was only a few short weeks later, as after they arrived there, that his wife gave birth to 2 children, 2 twins. 2 days later, those twins died. Time went on, and I'd just like to read to you from the journal, if you don't mind. If I can find it. Maria, his wife, contracted consumption, and all the children were stricken with malaria. 3 of the children died while moving through the early snows. Stillman buried them on the plains. Maria's condition worsened, even because of the grief and the pain and the fever of malaria. She could no longer walk. Weakened and sickly, she gave birth to twins, and they were named Joseph and Hiram, and both died within 2 days. Stillman Pond family arrived in winter quarters. And like many of the others' families, they suffered bitterly while they were there. The death of the 5 children coming across the plains to winter quarters was but the beginning. And now I read from their journal. On Wednesday, the 2nd of December, 1846, Laura Jane Pond, age 14 years, died of chills and fever. 2 days later, on Friday, the 4th of December, 1846, Harriet M. Pond, age 11, died with the chills. 3 days later, Monday, the 7th of December, 1846, Abigail A. Pond, age 18, died with chills. Just 5 weeks later, Friday, the 15th of January, 1847, Lyman Pond, age 6, died with chills and fever. 4 months later, on the 17th of May, 1847, Maria Pond also died crossing the plains. My great-grandfather lost 9 children and 2 wives. The reason that I'm telling the story is because what I want you to learn, first of all, from me is two really important things. Number one is that pain is pain, and you cannot distinguish pain. I also want you to know and understand that trauma is trauma, and you cannot distinguish between trauma. My great-grandfather lost 9 children, and he lost 2 wives. Okay, each and every one of you here in this little community may not have lost 9 children and 2 wives or 2 husbands, but I want you to understand that you went through some trauma. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to teach you a little bit about what's going on, if I could. And it's not working, so that's okay. Okay, we're going to start off because what I want you to look at first is that I want you to look is that every one of you in this audience and all of your children, you have become what I call victims. Now, does anybody have a definition of victim that you'd like to give? None? I'll give it. Next frame. Victim is anybody that's had something bad happen to them. Simple definition. Everybody here in this audience, I bet you everybody that you know, except maybe little teeny tiny babies, okay, they're all victims because all of us have had something bad happen to us. Next slide. The next slide, we can become a survivor. Now, can anybody give me a definition of survivor? You guys are shy.
Is it someone that overcomes their past experiences?
Okay, now I'm going to tick a few of you people off because I'm going to say wrong. What a survivor is, ladies and gentlemen, is a survivor is a victim waiting to happen. How does that grab you? Because what happens to us in life is we go from victimhood to survivor, and then as numerous folks today has talked about, we have triggers go off, and guess then what happens to us? Next slide. Okay, we now go back to being a victim again. And then we survive again, and then we become a victim again, and we survive again, and we become a victim again. Individuals in one of the statistics that was given earlier today is 1 in 4 women have been sexually abused. The first 15 years of my practice as a therapist, that's all I worked with was sexual abuse victims. Mostly children, a few teenagers, a few young adults, and a few older men and women. But the reality is they went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth because we go and we become the victim, they start to survive, and then we bring them back into court and we re-rape them. Okay, understand that your little community here 4 months ago had a tragedy. We start to heal and we start to survive, and then a couple of weeks ago, guess what we became again? We became a victim again. Now, where we want to go is to become a thriver. Next slide. Now, anybody know what a thriver is? Who was that? I think somebody online was giving us a definition of what a thriver was. Could you give us that definition again?
Yeah, I'm Caitlin. It's someone that overcomes their past experiences or their past trials.
They overcome them, and they take charge of their own healing, and they take the lemons that God has given us and turn it into lemonade. That's what I believe a thriver is. Now, if we can go to the next slide. What happens to us now, oops, next slide, there we go. It's coming, next one. Okay, what happens to us is now what happens when we become a victim. And I want to take you through a number of slides so that you can see how this happens. And then I want to take you through the positive aspect so you can see how, as a community, as adults, you can take charge. Most important, what I worry about is your children and how we can help them so that they can take charge, and then we can all become thrivers as a group. What happens to us now is we go and we start off with negative thoughts. Any of you have lots of positive thoughts the day that these traumas took place? Nope, nobody here. As I read about them, as I heard about them, nope, they didn't create any. And we go down from negative thoughts. The next thing that happens, next slide, is that negative thoughts creates doubt. Next slide. Okay, and it cycles. Negative thoughts creates doubt, doubt creates negative thoughts creates doubt. And now let me tell you how fast that happens. The average person, ladies and gentlemen, thinks at 400 thoughts a minute. That's 24,000 thoughts an hour. In the time that I'll be here with you, you'll have thought 24,000 thoughts. The average human being, okay, can create a 10,000 page novel in 80 hours. 2.5, 3 days after this tragedies happened, you have literally got novels written in your head all about the tragedies, all about the stuff that took place. And it's going along very, very fast. And so we're cycling through, and now doubt creates either, new slide, okay, it either creates hopelessness, okay, and now next slide, and it goes down to hopelessness. We start to feel hopeless. Your children, your youngest ones especially, they start to feel hopeless. Your older one's a little bit different. Your youngest is going to feel very hopeless. That hopelessness goes back up to doubt and the negative thoughts. And now what happens to us is those doubts starts to create either no action or negative action. So all of a sudden we're going down this negative road in our minds. Now, whenever you have action, and I want you to think back to the days following these things, how many of you were thinking or talking about everything negative that went on in this little community? Don't be shy. How many? Raise your hands, please, if you were there. We're thinking those negative thoughts and negative actions. And whenever we have negative thoughts and negative action, it creates knowledge. It gives us knowledge. And that knowledge now goes down, okay? And it goes right back up. And I don't know what happened to my little slides here. Bless my little secretary's heart. Okay, your knowledge now creates, and we always act upon the knowledge that we have. We missed a little slide in there. It's supposed to say we act upon our knowledge. That's what humans do. We gain knowledge and then we act upon it. When we act upon our knowledge, okay, it starts when it's negative, we turn selfish. In other words, what we're doing, give you the definition of selfish. In other words, we're thinking about ourselves. Guess what we're not thinking about? You may be thinking about your family, you may be thinking about yourself, but we become this selfish little thing. And next slide. When we become selfish, okay, it starts to decay. Okay, look at your community. I haven't lived here. I'm not from here, but I want you to look and I want you to say, is there all these things that are positive going on, or is it starting to decay and start to take away from what we do? When it starts to decay, eventually what will happen, ladies and gentlemen, is it will destroy. That's what happens to us, and this is the negative thought pattern. This pattern right here is what I call fear. This is fear. This is how fear is created. Now, I want to flip it. So next slide. And to be 2 slides. There we go. Thank you. Now let's change it and let's start to do with thoughts. Can I? And what I want to present to you right now is literally how all of us do everything in our lives. Is there anybody here that's newly married? Oh, can you come up for me? I have a volunteer. Okay, just we're going to show you how positive thoughts, and those of you that have been married, okay, we follow the same format that we're about to teach you, and she's going to be my lovely assistant, right? Okay, step over here by me so you can get close to the mic right here. There's the mic. You can even raise it up so it'll do. Okay, when you were engaged and falling in love, how long you been married?
2 months.
2 months. She is a newly married. Okay, how often did you think of your husband?
All the time.
One more
All the
time.
time.
All the time. Okay, and when she thought all the time, next slide, it created desire. Now, in the beginning, not later, but in the beginning, what was your desires? Speak right into that little mic.
To be married, to have a family, to just be together all the time, don't have to be apart.
Wow. Now, what happens is the thoughts then create a desire, and now desire creates what? More thoughts. And now you know why you thought about him so much. Now, when it cycles and it grows, it builds the next one is hope. Now, what was you hoping for?
A nice wedding
A nice wedding. That's all?
and a happy life.
And a happy life. Okay, so it cycles down and it goes right back up. And so all of a sudden we've got thoughts again, we've got desires again, and then it goes down to hope again. And it's during the hope process, when we're in hope, that we actually create a plan. Now, back when you were dating, what were you hoping for? Really?
To get married?
No, you
No.
weren't hoping. You was just hoping he'd ask you out again. And that you get to see him and go out on a date with him. Okay. And then all of a sudden, next slide, there's action. Now, for those of you that cannot see, she's turning red because she knows that my next question is, what kind of action was going on? You don't have to answer that. Okay, but it goes down. Okay, and there's action. And because there was action and you got to know him and you got to go out on a date and you got to laugh and you got to have fun, and she probably didn't even make out or nothing. But because of the action, guess what it gave her more of? Hope. In other words, you were looking forward to. Ladies and gentlemen, the definition of hope means to look forward with anticipation to something we believe we can have or do. That's what hope is. Okay, now we have action. Guess what it gave her?
Knowledge.
She had knowledge. Why on earth did you accept the second day with this guy?
Because I liked him and he liked me.
Ah. Now, what I know, ladies and gentlemen, there's no smart man. There's a lot of dumb guys. There's no smart guy that'll ask a woman to marry him if he doesn't know she's going to say yes. And when he said, will you marry me? What did you say?
Yes.
Yes. And there was knowledge. Now, here's the next step. And it's so important because it goes along with hope. When we have knowledge, we have to what?
Act.
One more time.
Act.
Act. We have to act upon the knowledge that we have. And that made it so that you and he made choices. And we made choices. And did we run out of things? There we go. Act goes back up. And we made these choices. And how long when you were dating did you guys decide you were only going to date each other?
A year and a half.
Okay, it took them a long time to gain the knowledge to make that act. Okay, Idaho guys and girls, I guess, do things slower than Utah. Because it's only
He's
about,
from Kentucky.
oh, there's the problem. It was the Kentucky part, not the Idaho part. Then what happens is we make a sacrifice. Okay, realize that in order for us to move forward and to grow, guess what you have to do?
Sacrifice.
Sacrifice. And the little guy from Kentucky and this beautiful girl here, they made a sacrifice. And when we sacrifice, next slide, it edifies. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, edification, ladies and gentlemen, means to build, to strengthen, to beautify. And this process right here is how we do everything. I challenge anybody here today to come to me if you're following a pattern of going forward in life to battle and tell me that everything you haven't done hasn't followed that pattern. It follows a pattern. My great-great-great-grandfather, okay, went through a whole lot of stuff and he sacrificed. Now, you have to understand, if everybody in my grandfather's family died, you got to look and say, Kent, where did you come from? Okay, now he went on to have 3 more wives, all at the same time, which is, in my mind, a big sacrifice. Okay, and 15 more kids, which is even a bigger sacrifice if you have all these grandkids. And so that's where we come from, and that's how we move forward. Now, what I'd like to do is I want you to shift for a minute, because again, I want you to see, do we want to stay as that victim and a survivor and go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth the rest of your life? Or do we want to take the community and especially our children, and do we want them to thrive? My hope, ladies and gentlemen, is that you'll want to help them thrive. Next slide. Okay, oh, bad picture there. Okay, the very first thing we want to do is we want to help individuals, we want to move forward. Okay, I call this goal setting. Being able to make realistic plans and take action to carry them out. Being able to see what is rather than what you would like to see as a part of this skill. Being proactive rather than reactive, and assertive rather than aggressive or passive. If I can talk, are components of this skill. Now, if you'll go down through that little format that I showed you of thoughts, desires, and hope, the reason that we have goal setting is because when we start to think positive thoughts and we set goals, it gives us hope. It gives us hope. Now, I want to give you another definition so that you can see why this is also important. This community, your children, especially those in the junior high, they are suffering from what we as therapists call loss. And I'm going to give you Ken Allen definition for loss, if that's okay. Loss is when we lose hopes and dreams that are core to our existence. Okay? How many of you here dreamed and hoped that your children would be involved in a school shooting? Would you look around, please? There's not one of you. If I brought your little children in here, there'd be some little weird boys that would say, I'd like that. Okay, but the rest of the world would not. And when we lose the hopes and the dreams that I can go to school and I can feel safe, that's scary. That's scary. Now, a couple of little concepts. I want to give you some definition, because you see, what's happening in your community at this time is you're going through a grieving process. Did you know that? You're going through a grieving process. Not one of you had hopes and dreams that your child would ever have to go through that kind of a situation. I've traveled all over the country. I was in Boston working with the first responders after the Boston bombing. I was in Florida after the shooting, working with first responders. My company's in 322 bases around the world as I'm working with the Wounded Warrior Transition Units, the soldiers who have lost their legs and their arms and their sight and their hearing. I'm working with those folks in my company, and we know about grieving. When you go through the grieving process, let me give you definition, please. The grieving process says it's the process that helps us let go of old hopes and dreams that we can no longer have. I'm sorry, we cannot take back what happened in your community. It's also the process that helps us establish new hopes and dreams that we can have. Two things you're not going to like. Number one, it's an unlearned process. Nobody can teach you how to grieve. Nobody can teach your children how to grieve until you're in it. Now, something that's going to scare you a little bit, because we study kids. We study people. We have tons and tons of research that goes on in this area. What we know is that children don't grieve like adults. Your teenagers, they're going to grieve sometime between 5-6 months later than what you will grieve. That ought to scare you just a little bit. So watch your teenagers since last May. Add up the months. They will grieve a little different. They just want life to get back to normal. They just want to be able to say everything's okay. I'm cool, Mom. I'm cool, Dad. Everything's good. And they want things to get back to normal. But what we find is that somewhere between 6 months and 8 months, they start to really start to process through, and they start to grieve, and they will start to process the things that you folks have already processed. Your little ones, okay, your little ones will do it right now, and it'll scare them. And they will want to know, is it okay for me? And that's those kids up to about 13, 14 years of age. I can't speak any closer. Let me get closer. Oh, there we go. We get real close to the mic. So what happens then to us is we're going through this grieving process, and it's an unlearned process that we have to learn how to go through. And you will do that in your own space and time. The last part of the definition says it's a feeling process, not a thinking process. And guess what everybody here is trying to do? You're trying to go through by thinking it through. And it isn't a thinking process, it's a feeling process. Now, I did some really hard research about Idahoans. Is that what you call yourselves? I'm trying to make fun. I'm sorry. What I know is that Idaho men have 4 feelings. They can be happy, they can be angry, they can be hungry, and they can be horny. That's it. The rest of the women, you can have them all. Okay? So realize that you're going to try to think through this, and it will never, ever make sense. When it comes to humans and study of humans, I'm a pretty smart guy. And for 32 years, I've been practicing study of humans. And guess what I've never been able to figure out? I've never been able to figure out why people do what they do. Because it just doesn't make sense. And so what I'm throwing at you is don't try to think it through, feel it through. And when your children come to you and say, I've got this question, and I've got these feelings, please don't dismiss them. Listen to them. Love them. Give them comfort. Let them know that you're there and that you understand. And realize that they're going to be there before you or after you in your process. And the most important thing you can do is connect with them. Now, go back to the definition that says it's a unlearned process, and we're letting go of past dreams and starting new ones. This is how we start having new hopes and dreams. Next slide. Okay, we want to avoid thinking traps. Okay, in our thinking traps, what happens is we think negative thoughts. When I told you that you think 400 thoughts a minute, that's the average person. If you're a little on the OCD side, or if you're ADD like I am, you're going to think somewhere between 12 and 1,800 thoughts a minute. Okay, know and understand that what we want to do is we want to be able to manage the strong feelings. Your feelings are created by your thoughts. The way that you control the feelings and avoid those traps is by changing the thoughts. Now, here's a strange little thing that we learned a long time ago. The average person, 72 hours after a major tragedy happens, has already thought through everything they're going to think. And from that point forward, guess what you're doing? You're thinking the same thoughts over and over again. And every time you think those thoughts, how's it going to make you feel? And 6 months from now, when you think through everything, how's it going to make you feel? And a year from now, when you're thinking about it, how's it going to make you feel? It'll always make you feel bad. And that's why we want to avoid those traps. Next slide. Okay? With you and your children, put it into perspective. Stop catastrophic thinking, reduce anxiety, and improve problem solving by identifying the worst, the best, and the most likely outcomes of any solution. As you do this with your children, what you will start to do is it will be ingrained in their minds to look at the worst, but then I got to look at the best, and then what's the normal? What's most likely to happen? And as you teach that and you become that, then again, now we're starting to bring us up and we're starting to thinking positive thoughts again instead of the negative. Next slide. Okay. Most important thing, not most important, but it's very important, is that you connect with others. I want you to go down and I want you to look at this last one. Can you see what it says? It says, have at least one friend that isn't crazy. Now, I may be weird, probably because I'm a therapist and everybody I know is a little bit crazy. But it's really, really important to find somebody to be a friend that isn't crazy. That as you go for your walks or you go for your drives or you go for your talks or you go get a Coke, that when you're sitting down with them, they listen to you as you now regurgitate the thing that happened, and they've heard that about 18 times. They're going to look at you and say, we talked about this yesterday, and nothing's changed. And now you got your good friends, and then what you do is you be able to switch, and you go down and you have folks in your friendships so that you can have the love and the encouragement and the reassurance. Guess what your kids need? They need the same thing. Next slide. Communicate. Being able to communicate well with others and problem solve both individually and with others. This includes basic communication, listening, problem solving skills such as brainstorming with others for reasons why there's a problem and the causes of those problems, and then brainstorming for solutions. When I said to you that the average person writes a 10,000-page novel every 80 hours. What I failed to tell you was that 75% of what's in your head in those novels is nothing but fiction. We think there's only one solution, there's only one way. And as we think there's only one solution on one way, we get stuck, and it'll keep you stuck. And that's why it's so important to be flexible and brainstorm as a group, as a community, as a family, for solutions.
Have a good game. See ya.
Okay? Be flexible. By definition, flexibility is a key component of resiliency. It's one of the primary factors in emotional adjustment and maturity. This requires that an individual be flexible in his or her thinking and his or her actions. And by doing so, the individual is able to see that there is one more way to solve a problem. A very smart man, I don't know how wise he was, said, crazy people are people who think the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Look and see where you're at, and look and see where you're stuck. Now, before I close, because they told me I had to be done, I would like you to think of one more little spot on that little line that I said that says, we think positive thoughts and all the way down, and we start to sacrifice. I've been involved with lots and lots of folks in the grieving process, lots and lots of folks who have been traumatized. My little company, just our wounded warriors, has gone over 350,000 soldiers. That's a lot of folks. I go around the Intermountain West and I lecture on grieving. I'm headed to Boise tonight after I get done here to spend all day tomorrow with the grieving groups up in Boise. They've organized a widow and widowers grieving conference. Wonderful, wonderful people who have lost spouses. Now they've taken their tragedies and they're turned it around, and now they're helping other people as they go through their tragedies. It's pretty cool what they're doing. In closing. Not to end on a low note, but I got to give you one more statistics that you probably don't want to hear. Idaho leads the nation in cyberbullying. Don't know if you knew that. Cyberbullying, ladies and gentlemen, is the #1 cause of suicide in youth. Until we teach, until we help, until we go out and literally have them be able to see how people think and how people feel, some of these things will never change. The only way that they'll ever see anything change is by following your example as you serve and you look for ways to serve. Last story, and then I promise I'll be done because I got 4 more minutes. And then they said I have to be done. Last December, I came home from a trip, and my wife called me on the way home from the airport, and she said, "Sonny, will you stop at Smith's and will you pick up some stuff?" And I went into our local Smith store, and as I got ready to check out, there was a little mother. She was just a young mother. She had 2 little babies, a little one in a little, like it couldn't have been more than a couple months old. And then it looked like a little 2 or 3-year-old girl. And she got up to the checking line. And then in front of me was a young man who I would have called up until that point, and I've changed my mind and I don't think about this anymore, but I would have called him a punk. Covered with tattoos. He had his pants and they were shorts and they were down so that you could see, well, you could see some things that we don't even talk about, okay? And he had his hat on sideways and he was sitting right in front of me, and this little gal got all done checking out, and the cashier said, "That'll be $50, 50-something dollars." I know that's what it was. And this little girl opened her purse, and you could just see all of a sudden that the money that she thought was there was gone. Okay, she must not have had a credit card, and she fumbled around, and immediately this young man opened his wallet and took out $60 and laid it on the counter. He says, "I'll take care of that for you." He then turned around and said, "Excuse me," as he passed on. He said, "I forgot some things I'm supposed to pick up," and he left. I went through, I checked out, and as I was walking out the door, this young man walked out the door with me with nothing in his hand. He spent his $60 taking care of a little mother with 2 children. As a community, ladies and gentlemen, to heal, to move forward, that's where we've got to go. I'll be here if anybody has questions. I'll be out in the hall because they got to get the next person here. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for letting me be here. If you need any information, we have it. You guys have got my information. They will give you my information. Feel free to email me. Feel free to text me. Very seldom you'll get me on a phone call. But I promise you, if you will text me and say, "I was there," or you email me, you will get a response from me. We have lots of resources. We have lots of answers to what you're dealing with. But thank you so much, and God bless you.